He was the king of rock and roll. He sold over 1 billion records. He changed music, culture, and fashion forever. On August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley was found dead at his Graceland home. The official cause was a heart attack. He was 42 years old, but that's where the simple story ends, and the mystery begins. Was it really his heart? Or was it the thousands of prescription pills he was taking? Why was his middle name Aaron misspelled as Aaron on his gravestone, a name he legally changed years before? Why did his father have the official autopsy report sealed for 50 years until 2027? And why for decades have thousands of sane, rational people sworn they have seen him, talked to him, or found evidence that he faked his own death to escape the crushing prison of his fame? The story of Elvis's final years and his death isn't a straight line. It's a tangled web of conflicting reports, sealed documents, family secrets, and a public that refuses to let go. The truth seems to get further away with each passing year. Here are the reasons why the mystery may never be solved. Number 18 has too much time simply passed. The biggest obstacle to solving the Elvis mystery might be the simplest one. Time. More than 4 decades have passed since that August day in 1977. The world has changed. People have moved on. And most importantly, the people who knew the truth are either gone or their memories have faded. Think about a criminal investigation. The first 48 hours are critical. The evidence is fresh. Witness memories are sharp. But in the case of Elvis Presley, the scene was compromised almost immediately. Graceland was his home, not a sterile crime scene. People were grieving, panicking. The key players who could offer a clear, unbiased account are no longer with us. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, died in 1979, just 2 years after his son. He was the one who made the critical decision to have the autopsy sealed. He was the one who controlled the initial narrative. Whatever his reasons were, whatever secrets he knew about his son's health or state of mind, he took them to his grave. Dr. George Nicopolis, or Dr. Nick, the man who prescribed Elvis thousands upon thousands of pills, died in 2016. He stood trial, was acquitted of criminal charges, but lost his medical license. He wrote a book, The King and Dr. Nick, giving his side of the story. But was it the whole truth? Or was it a version of events designed to protect his reputation? We can no longer ask him. We can no longer cross-examine his memory. Many members of the Memphis Mafia, the inner circle of friends and employees who lived with and for Elvis, are also gone. And Joe Esposito, his road manager and one of his closest friends, was a key figure. He was there in the aftermath. He helped manage the chaos. He gave countless interviews over the years. But he passed away in 2016. Other members like Charlie Hodge and Lamar Fike are also deceased. Each man held a piece of the puzzle. Each man saw a different side of Elvis in those final months. Now, their stories exist only in old interviews and books, and those stories don't always line up. Even the physical evidence is a victim of time. The original toxicology report, which was so central to the controversy, is now an old document. The science of toxicology has advanced dramatically since 1977. Could a modern analysis of the original samples tell us more? Perhaps, but where are those samples? Are they still preserved? Are they viable? The chain of custody over 40 years could be a legal nightmare. The bedroom and bathroom where Elvis spent his final hours have been preserved, but they are part of a museum toured by millions. They are no longer a source of fresh evidence, they are a monument to a memory. The truth, if it ever existed in a pure, simple form, has been eroded by the years. It's been scattered across the memories of people who are no longer here to tell the tale. We are left with fragments, with echoes, with stories that have been told so many times they've become legends. The passage of time doesn't just make evidence disappear, it hardens myths into perceived facts. The stories told in the 1980s and 90s have become the foundation of the mystery. Challenging them now is almost impossible because the primary sources are gone. We are left studying the myth of Elvis's death, not the event itself. What key secrets died with Vernon Presley in 1979? If a new witness came forward today with a radically different story, would anyone even believe them after all this time? Are we at a point where the only thing left to analyze are the conflicting stories, with no hope of ever finding a baseline truth? Number 17, why do we need him to be alive? The mystery of Elvis Presley isn't just about facts and evidence. It's about us. It's about our relationship with fame, with heroes, and with death. Part of the reason the mystery will never be solved is because a large number of people don't want it to be. The idea that Elvis is still out there is more comforting, more interesting than the sad reality of his final days. Elvis wasn't just a singer. For many, he was a quasi-religious figure. He represented a kind of American dream. A poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who became the most famous man in the world. He was handsome, talented, charismatic, and generous. His death at 42 was a shock. It felt wrong. It didn't fit the narrative. Heroes aren't supposed to die bloated and addicted to prescription drugs on their bathroom floor. So a new narrative was created. The Elvis is alive theory isn't just a conspiracy. It's a modern myth. It's a way of coping with a collective trauma. The psychologist and author Alan M. Shevchenko wrote the book The Mind Manipulators, and while it doesn't focus on Elvis, it explores the human need to find patterns and explanations for unsettling events. The official story of Elvis's death is deeply unsettling. The alternative story, that he was so clever and powerful he could outsmart the entire world and escape his own fame, is empowering. It restores his agency, it makes him the hero again. This phenomenon isn't unique to Elvis. We see it with other cultural icons whose deaths were sudden or tragic. Think of JFK, Marilyn Monroe, or Princess Diana. The official stories are often rejected in favor of more elaborate conspiracy. It's a way of saying the world isn't this random and cruel. There must be a bigger plan, a secret reason. In Elvis's case, the myth says he got tired of the spotlight. He wanted a normal life, so he used his vast resources to stage his death and disappear. This story turns a tragic end into a triumphant new beginning. Gail Brewer Giorgio is a key figure in promoting this myth. Her 1988 book, Is Elvis Alive?, became a bestseller. It wasn't just a collection of sightings. It presented a theory, based on what she claimed was a taped phone conversation, that Elvis had gone into a witness protection program. This idea, however unlikely, gave the myth a framework. It gave believers something to hold on to. The desire to believe is a powerful force. It can make people see Elvis's face in a screen door at Graceland or hear his voice in the background of a movie. It's a psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia, where the brain finds familiar patterns in random stimuli. But for a believer, it's not a trick of the mind, it's proof. The mystery persists because it fulfills a deep human need for hope, for magic, and for a world where our heroes don't just fade away. The persistence of the Elvis myth says more about our culture than it does about Elvis Presley. We have deified a celebrity to the point where his mortality is unacceptable. The industry built around Is Elvis Alive? The books, the TV specials, the websites also ensures the mystery is never solved, because a solved mystery is no longer profitable or interesting. Because is the belief that Elvis is alive a form of collective grief that a generation has never fully processed? Does the myth serve as a way to reject the uncomfortable truth about addiction and the dark side of fame? Concrete DNA proof were presented tomorrow that Elvis died in 1977. How many people would simply claim the proof was fake? And number 16, was he a federal agent in hiding? This is one of the more elaborate and persistent theories, and it taps directly into Elvis's strange and fascinating personality in his later years. The idea is that Elvis didn't just run away from fame. He was actively recruited by the federal government and placed in witness protection. Why? Because he was going to help them take down a criminal organization. The theory gained significant traction with the publication of Gail Brewer Giorgio's book, Is Elvis Alive? She and other proponents point to a few key pieces of evidence. The most famous is Elvis's bizarre meeting with President Richard Nixon on December 21st, 1970. The story itself is true and well documented. Elvis, on a whim, flew to Washington, D.C. and wrote a 5-page letter on American Airlines stationery, which he hand-delivered to the White House gate. In it, he expressed his patriotism, his concern about the drug culture and hippies, and his desire to help his country. He requested a meeting with Nixon and asked to be made a federal agent at large for the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. Incredibly, the meeting was arranged. The photo of a caped, bejeweled Elvis shaking hands with a stiff-looking President Nixon is one of the most requested images from the National Archives. To most people, this is a fascinating but weird footnote in history. To believers, it's the origin story. They argue this meeting wasn't just a photo op, it was the beginning of a secret relationship. Elvis, with his access to the entertainment industry, was in a unique position to gather intelligence on organized crime, drug trafficking, and other illegal activities allegedly connected to Hollywood. The theory often names a specific criminal organization called the Fraternity, supposedly a group of racketeers Elvis had become entangled with through financial dealings related to his tours and investments. The story goes that by 1977, the Fraternity knew Elvis was an informant. His life was in danger. The government, to protect their asset, helped him stage his death and gave him a new identity. This theory is fueled by Elvis's own documented obsession with law enforcement. It wasn't a passing hobby. He collected police badges from departments all over the country. He had sirens and police radios installed in his cars. He often drove around Memphis with a blue flashing light on his dashboard, pulling people over for minor infractions as a joke. He saw himself as a crime fighter, a patriot who stood for traditional values against a counterculture he didn't understand. His letter to Nixon wasn't a joke to him. He was deadly serious. He truly believed he could help in the war on drugs, an idea drenched in irony given his own profound prescription drug abuse. The theory suggests his drug use was actually a cover, a way to appear non-threatening to the criminal elements he was investigating. While there is zero credible evidence to support the witness protection theory, it weaves together real, documented aspects of Elvis's personality into a compelling narrative. It reframes his eccentricities as part of a heroic secret mission. It's a perfect example of how the truth of Elvis's strange life helps fuel the mystery of his death. Why would the US government go to such extraordinary lengths for a celebrity informant when they had thousands of professional agents? If his death was faked, why would they allow the narrative of a drug-addicted, overweight celebrity to become his official legacy? Could Elvis's well-known generosity and sometimes naive business dealings have accidentally brought him into contact with genuinely dangerous people, making him fear for his life for reasons we still don't understand? Question number 15, was Dr. Nick a scapegoat or a conspirator? You can't talk about Elvis's death without talking about Dr. George Nicopolis. Dr. Nick was Elvis's personal physician, and his role in the final years of the king's life is one of the most debated and troubling parts of the story. Was he a caring doctor trapped in an impossible situation with a powerful, demanding patient? Was he a negligent enabler who fueled the addiction that killed his most famous client? Or, as some of the more extreme theories suggest, was he a key player in a plot to fake Elvis's death? Whatever the truth, his actions in the subsequent legal battles have left a permanent cloud of uncertainty over the official narrative. The sheer numbers are staggering. In the final 8 months of Elvis's life, from January to August 1977, Dr. Nick wrote prescriptions for over 10,000 doses of narcotics, amphetamines, and sedatives for Elvis. This was revealed during the 1981 criminal trial where Dr. Nick was charged with 11 felony counts of overprescribing drugs to Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, and others. The defense argued that Dr. Nick was trying to control Elvis's intake. They claimed Elvis was a junkie who would get drugs from anyone, so Dr. Nick's strategy was to prescribe what Elvis demanded, but then try to substitute placebos, effectively weaning him off the dangerous substances. They portrayed a doctor who was trying to manage an unmanageable patient, a man who couldn't say no to Elvis Presley. The jury acquitted Dr. Nick on all criminal charges. However, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners saw things differently. In 1995, after years of hearings and appeals, they permanently revoked his medical license, stating he was guilty of gross malpractice. So, the legal system gave two different answers. This contradiction is at the heart of the mystery. If he was criminally innocent, does that mean the drugs didn't kill Elvis? If he was guilty of gross malpractice, how can the official cause of death be a simple cardiac arrhythmia? The conspiracy theories take this a step further. They don't see Dr. Nick as a well-meaning but weak doctor. They see him as an accomplice. In a fake death scenario, you would need a doctor to sign the death certificate. You would need a medical professional to manage the official story. Dr. Nick was perfectly positioned. Some have suggested he supplied Elvis with drugs that could simulate the symptoms of a heart attack, or that he was the one who pronounced him dead, knowing full well that Elvis was merely in a drug-induced coma, ready to be whisked away. These ideas are, of course, wild speculation, but they are fueled by the undeniable fact that Dr. Nick's actions were, at the very least, highly unethical and unprofessional. His own book, The King and Dr. Nick, presents his side, but it also raises more questions. He was a man who was clearly devoted to Elvis, but also a man who participated in a medical regimen that was, by any objective standard, incredibly dangerous. The role of Dr. Nick complicates any simple explanation of Elvis's death. He was both the gatekeeper of the drugs and the man tasked with preserving Elvis's health. This fundamental conflict of interest makes his testimony and his motives forever suspect. He can be seen as a villain, a victim, or a pawn, and there is evidence to support all three interpretations. If Dr. Nick was truly trying to help Elvis by using placebos, where is the evidence or testimony from pharmacists or staff to support this? Why did he continue to prescribe such massive quantities of drugs even after Elvis had several near-fatal overdoses? Could Dr. Nick have been blackmailed or threatened by Elvis, forced to continue the prescriptions against his better judgment? Number 14, what about the secret half-brother? One of the more peculiar and persistent side stories in the Elvis saga involves a hidden family member. The idea is that Elvis had help faking his death from a secret brother, someone unknown to the public who could move around freely and make arrangements. This theory often gets tangled up with the very real tragedy of Elvis's birth. Elvis was a twin. His brother, Jesse Garon Presley, was stillborn 35 minutes before Elvis was delivered on January 8th, 1935. This loss haunted Elvis his entire life. He often spoke to his brother in private and felt a deep spiritual connection to him. Some theories suggest that Jesse didn't actually die, but was secretly given away and raised elsewhere, only to reconnect with Elvis later in life. This is by all accounts pure fantasy. However, a more recent and complex claim emerged in the 2000s from a woman named Eliza Presley. She claimed to be the daughter of Vernon Presley from a secret relationship he had after Elvis's mother, Gladys, died. This would make her Elvis's half-sister. She legally changed her name to Eliza Presley and has been a vocal proponent of the theory that Elvis is alive. Her central claim revolves around DNA evidence. She worked with Dr. Donald Hinton, a physician who claimed to be treating a man who was in fact Elvis Presley. Hinton wrote a book called The Presley Deception, alleging that he had been secretly caring for Elvis since the late 1990s. According to Eliza Presley and her supporters, she obtained a DNA sample from a man she believes is her cousin, the son of Elvis's aunt. She also claims to have DNA from the man Dr. Hinton was treating, the alleged living Elvis. She has stated that the DNA analysis proves a familial link, suggesting the man is indeed a Presley. However, these claims are highly controversial and have never been verified by a mainstream independent scientific body. The evidence is self-published and promoted within the Elvis is Alive community. The mainstream media and Elvis Presley enterprises have completely ignored it. This theory introduces a new layer to the mystery. It's not just about a faked death, but a hidden family. It suggests a conspiracy that goes beyond Elvis himself, involving Vernon Presley and other family members. It attempts to use the language of science, DNA analysis, to give credibility to the story. But without independent verification, it remains on the fringes. The story of Jesse Garon, the lost twin, speaks to the psychological element of the mystery. The story of Eliza Presley, the alleged half-sister, tries to ground the mystery in forensic evidence, however disputed that evidence may be. As both threads suggest that the Presley family tree may have secrets that are key to understanding the whole affair. The introduction of secret family members, whether mythical like a surviving Jesse or alleged like Eliza, serves a key narrative purpose. It provides a how. How could Elvis have pulled it off? With the help of a family member no one knew existed. It creates a secret ally, an unknown variable that makes the impossible seem plausible. Is it possible that the Presley family, with its roots in rural Mississippi, had family secrets and hidden relationships that have never been made public? Could DNA from Elvis's surviving family members, like his daughter Lisa Marie before her death or his grandchildren, be used to definitively debunk or prove these claims? Why have these DNA claims from the Aleph camp never been subjected to a fully transparent third-party scientific review? Number 13, why was the coffin so heavy? On the day of Elvis's funeral, August 18, 1977, something strange was noted by the pallbearers. The copper coffin, an expensive model called the Promethean, seemed unusually heavy. This detail, mentioned by some of Elvis's own family and friends, has become a cornerstone of the faked death theory. The official explanation is simple. The Promethean model is a high-end coffin made of solid bronze with a steel liner, weighing around 900 pounds on its own. Elvis's body weight at the time of his death was estimated to be around 250 pounds. so a total weight of over 1150 pounds is entirely plausible. But for those who believe Elvis is alive, the weight is a clue. The theory is that the coffin did not contain the body of Elvis Presley. Instead, it contained a carefully crafted wax dummy made to look like him. To make the dummy's weight match that of a real body, it would have been weighted down. And to keep the wax from melting in the humid Memphis heat, the coffin was supposedly fitted with a powerful, heavy air conditioning unit. This, they claim, explains the excessive weight and the unusual coolness of the coffin to the touch. The idea sounds like something out of a spy movie, but it addresses a key problem for the conspiracy. How do you have a funeral with an open casket if the body is missing? This theory is often linked to another odd event. A few months after the funeral, in October 1977, Vernon Presley had Elvis's body, along with his mother Gladys's body, moved from Forest Hill Cemetery to the Meditation Garden at Graceland. The official reason was security. An attempt had been made to steal Elvis's body from the mausoleum. But conspiracy theorists ask a different question. Was this move an opportunity to dispose of the wax dummy and the cooling unit, with the coffin now empty or filled with sandbags? There's no hard evidence to support the wax dummy theory. It's based on anecdotal reports about the coffin's weight and a deep suspicion of the official story. However, it's a powerful piece of the mythology because it's so visual. It creates a chilling image Elvis's family and friends grieving over a wax effigy while the real Elvis is on a plane to a new life. This idea was explored in the infamous 1988 TV special, The Elvis Files, hosted by Bill Bixby, which brought many of these theories to a national audience. The show dramatized the heavy coffin scenario, cementing it in the minds of a generation of believers. The simple, logical explanation of the coffin's own weight is rejected in favor of a more elaborate conspiratorial one because the conspiracy is more exciting and fits the larger narrative of a grand deception. The coffin story is a classic example of how a mundane detail can be reinterpreted to fit a pre-existing belief. An unusually heavy coffin is not proof of anything on its own, but within the context of the Elvis is alive theory, it becomes a crucial piece of physical evidence, a tangible clue that something was wrong from the very beginning. Why would Vernon Presley, a man known for being careful with money, spend a fortune on a 900-pound solid bronze coffin if it was just for a temporary burial? If there was an air conditioning unit inside, wouldn't it have required a power source and made a noticeable noise? Could the pallbearer's perception of the weight simply have been amplified by the emotional and physical strain of the moment? Number 12, where's the definitive DNA evidence? In our modern world, we look to science to solve mysteries. DNA is the gold standard of proof. A single hair, a drop of saliva, can identify a person with near perfect accuracy. So, why hasn't DNA definitively solved the Elvis mystery once and for all? The answer is complicated. It's a mix of a lack of a verified sample, questionable claims, and the fact that you can't prove a negative. To prove Elvis died, you would need to exhume his body from Graceland and take a DNA sample. Elvis Presley Enterprises and his family would never allow this desecration. It's a non-starter. So the only other option is to get a verified DNA sample of Elvis from another source, a medical sample, a lock of hair, and compare it to the DNA of people who claim to be him. This is where the problems begin. Over the years, many people have claimed to have Elvis's DNA. But the chain of custody is always questionable. In 2002, a television special called Is Elvis Alive? Claimed it would solve the mystery. They had obtained a DNA sample from the alleged living Elvis, the man being treated by Dr. Donald Hinton, and were going to compare it to DNA from a known Elvis artifact. The artifact was a wart removed from Elvis's hand in 1958. However, the show's producers couldn't definitively prove the wart was authentic. The results were inconclusive, and the show was widely panned as a publicity stunt. Then there is the issue of a baseline. To prove a sample belongs to Elvis, you need a confirmed 100% authentic sample of his DNA to compare it to. The military has DNA records of soldiers, but it's unclear if they took samples back when Elvis served in the late 1950s. Medical records are private, so scientists would likely need to get DNA from his known living relatives, like his granddaughter Riley Keough, to establish a Presley family genetic profile. This is a private matter, and it's unlikely the family would participate in a project designed to humor conspiracy theorists. On the flip side, you can't prove Elvis is alive with DNA either. Let's say a man in Kalamazoo, Michigan, claims to be Elvis. You take his DNA. It doesn't match the Presley family profile. The believers will just say, well, that man was an imposter, but the real Elvis is still out there. You can't test every single person who might be Elvis. Science can't prove that a person doesn't exist somewhere on the planet. This is the logical trap of the mystery. The burden of proof is on the believers, but any evidence they present is easily dismissed as fraudulent, while the lack of evidence for their claim is seen by them as part of the conspiracy success. DNA could potentially debunk a specific claimant, but it can't debunk the entire myth. DNA is a powerful tool, but it's not magic. It requires verified samples and a clear chain of custody, two things that are almost impossible to obtain in a case this old and this mythologized. The desire for a simple scientific answer clashes with the messy reality of a 40-year-old mystery protected by family privacy and commercial interests. If the US military does have a confirmed DNA sample from Elvis's time in the Army, could a Freedom of Information Act request ever make it public? Could new technology analyze DNA from a letter Elvis licked in the 1970s? And would that be considered definitive proof? If a body were to be exhumed from Graceland and the DNA did not match the Presley family, what would that mean for history? Number 11 are the sightings. Just wishful thinking. The entire Elvis is alive phenomenon began with a simple human act seeing a familiar face in a crowd. The first and most famous sighting occurred in Kalamazoo, Michigan in the late 1980s. A woman named Louise Welling claimed she saw Elvis in line at a local Burger King. She took a photo. The story, along with the blurry picture of a man with a graying pompadour, was published in the supermarket tabloids and exploded into a national obsession. Soon, people were seeing Elvis everywhere, at a supermarket in Louisiana, pumping gas in Oregon, working as an Elvis impersonator in a small bar, hiding in plain sight. Are these thousands of sightings credible? Psychologists would say, almost certainly not. They point to a number of well-understood phenomena. First is the power of suggestion. Once the idea that Elvis might be alive was planted in the public consciousness, people started looking for him. Our brains are wired to find patterns, and we are especially good at facial recognition. If you are actively looking for someone who looks like a middle-aged Elvis, you will eventually find someone who vaguely fits the description. Add to that the sheer number of Elvis impersonators in the world, and the odds of seeing an Elvis-like person are quite high. And then there's the concept of wishful thinking or confirmation bias. For fans who were devastated by his death, seeing him alive would be a validation of their hope. It's a way of rejecting the tragic end and rewriting the story. Any evidence that confirms this belief, like a blurry photo or a man with sideburns, is accepted. Any evidence to the contrary is ignored or dismissed as part of the cover-up. The most famous photographic evidence besides the Burger King photo is a picture taken at Graceland in 1984. A man who bears a striking resemblance to Elvis is seen in the background, standing behind a screen door. Believers are certain this is Elvis visiting his old home. Skeptics say it's just a groundskeeper or a tourist who happens to look like him. The sightings have become a kind of modern folklore. There's the story of the black helicopter that supposedly landed at Graceland on the day of his death to whisk him away. There's the story of the mysterious man named John Burroughs, an alias Elvis was known to use, who bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires the day after Elvis died. These stories are passed around, embellished, and treated as evidence, but they are just stories. There is no ticket stub, no flight manifest, no credible witness from the airline. The sightings and the stories they generate are the fuel that keeps the mystery alive. They provide a constant stream of new evidence for those who want to believe. The sightings are not about evidence, they are about faith. No sighting has ever been verified. No photograph has ever stood up to scrutiny. They are cultural artifacts, a testament to how deeply Elvis was embedded in the public psyche. He was so alive in people's minds that it became hard to accept that he was physically gone. Has anyone ever used modern facial recognition software to analyze the most famous sighting, photos against verified pictures of Elvis? Why have none of the thousands of people who claim to have seen Elvis ever produced a clear, undeniable video or audio recording? If Elvis were truly living a quiet life, why would he repeatedly risk exposure by going out to public places like Burger King? Number 10 was John Burroughs, his escape identity. Every good escape plan needs an alias. For Elvis Presley, that alias was John Burroughs. This wasn't a name invented by conspiracy theorists. It was a real name. Elvis used for years when he wanted to travel without being recognized. He used it to book hotels, flights, and make private arrangements. The name itself was a combination of the actor Jon Voight whom he admired, and his friend and road manager Joe Esposito's stepfather, who had the last name Burroughs. Members of the Memphis Mafia have confirmed this in numerous books and interviews. It was his go-to pseudonym. This documented fact is the launching point for one of the most compelling narratives in the Elvis is alive theory. The story, which became a centerpiece of the 1988 TV special The Elvis Files, alleges that on August 17, 1977, the day after Elvis's death, a man who looked like Elvis, using the name John Burroughs, purchased a one-way ticket in cash at the Memphis airport for a flight to Buenos Aires, Argentina. The destination is key. Argentina, at the time, was a country that did not have an extradition treaty with the United States. It was a perfect place to disappear. This story is incredibly specific. It provides a name, a date, a location, and a destination. It creates a clear timeline for his escape. While the world was focused on the chaos at Graceland, the real Elvis, under his trusted alias, was supposedly slipping out of the country to start a new life. Proponents of this theory claim to have an audio tape of Elvis recorded in the 1980s, where he discusses his escape. On this tape, the man they claim is Elvis talks about his plan, his reasons for leaving, and his new life. The voice on the tape is a slow, southern drawl, and it does sound remarkably like an older Elvis. This tape was promoted heavily by Gail Brewer-Giorgio in her book Is Elvis Alive and became a sensation. However, the evidence for the John Burroughs flight is non-existent. No airline has any record of a John Burroughs flying from Memphis to Buenos Aires on that day. No ticket agent has ever come forward. The audio tape has been analyzed by voice experts with conflicting results. Some say it's him, others say it's a talented impersonator. Without any corroborating evidence, the story remains just a story. But it's a powerful one because it uses a real detail from Elvis's life, his use of the alias, to build a bridge from fact to fiction. It makes the fantastic idea of his escape seem grounded in reality. It's not just a random theory, it's a theory based on his actual methods of operation. The John Burroughs story is a perfect micro-mystery within the larger Elvis saga. It shows how a verifiable fact, the use of the alias, can be used as a seed to grow a massive conspiracy theory. It provides a clean, simple explanation for how he could have physically escaped the country at the very moment the world thought he was dead. If someone bought a ticket in cash, would a record even exist from 1977? Could he have used a private jet, completely bypassing commercial airlines? Why Argentina, a country where he didn't speak the language and had no known connections? Number 9. Was he planning to disappear? Perhaps the most compelling argument that Elvis might have faked his death comes not from blurry photos or strange sightings, but from the man himself. In his final years, Elvis was a man in turmoil. He was deeply unhappy with his life, his career, and his physical condition. He felt trapped by his own image. He was also on a deep and often strange spiritual quest. He read hundreds of books on religion, philosophy, and the afterlife. He was fascinated by the idea of transcending the physical world. This has led many to believe he wasn't planning suicide, but a different kind of escape, a spiritual and physical disappearance. One of the most important books in Elvis's life was The Impersonal Life. He was given the book in 1964, and it became his personal Bible. He gave away hundreds of copies to friends and strangers. The book preaches a philosophy of detaching from the ego, the I, and realizing that one's true self is part of a universal consciousness, or God. It talks about the body as a mere vessel. For someone who felt trapped inside the Elvis Presley persona, this philosophy would have been incredibly appealing. It offered a spiritual justification for abandoning his identity. Members of the Memphis Mafia, like his friend and spiritual mentor Larry Geller, have spoken at length about Elvis's state of mind. He would talk for hours about wanting to escape. He would fantasize about what it would be like to walk down the street and not be recognized. He once told Geller, "I'm so tired of being Elvis Presley. These weren't just passing comments." It was a recurring theme of his final years. He felt his career had become a joke of sequined jumpsuits and meaningless Las Vegas shows. He wanted to do serious acting. He wanted to produce films. But his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, kept him on the treadmill of touring and recording. Could this deep dissatisfaction have led him to formulate a plan? He had the money, the resources, and a network of loyal people. The idea of staging his death might have seemed like the only way out. It would be the ultimate act of taking control of his life, a life that he felt was no longer his own. This theory doesn't require a government conspiracy or a secret brother. It only requires a man who is desperate, brilliant, and spiritually convinced that his identity was something he could and should shed. He had already achieved everything a person could achieve in the material world. Maybe the only frontier left for him to conquer was anonymity. This line of reasoning is powerful because it's rooted in Elvis's documented psychology. We know he was unhappy. We know he was a spiritual seeker. We know he felt trapped. Faking his death seems like an extreme solution, but Elvis was an extreme person. His whole life was larger than life. Why should his escape be any different? Did Elvis's obsession with spiritual texts provide him with a blueprint for how to kill his old self and be reborn? Could he have seen faking his death not as a deception, but as a genuine spiritual act of transcendence? How much of his talk about escaping was serious planning, and how much was just the late-night ramblings of a man struggling with depression and addiction? Number 8. Why was the life insurance policy never cashed? Its money often reveals the truth. In the aftermath of a death, one of the first things that happens is the filing of a life insurance claim. It's a standard procedure. According to several investigators and authors, including those behind the Elvis is Alive movement, Elvis Presley had a life insurance policy with Lloyd's of London worth several $1,000,000. And yet, this policy was reportedly never cashed. This single unconfirmed financial detail has been cited for years as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that Elvis did not die. The logic is simple. A life insurance policy only pays out upon proof of death. If the policy was never claimed, it could mean that the insurance company did not receive satisfactory proof. Or, more tantalizingly, it could mean that Elvis himself was the beneficiary and he couldn't cash it in because that would reveal he was still alive. It's illegal to cash in your own life insurance policy. This is not just a rumor, it was a central point in early documentaries and books about the conspiracy. They claimed to have inside sources confirming the existence of the policy and the fact that it remained unclaimed years after his death. If this is true, it raises serious questions. Why would Vernon Presley, as the executor of Elvis's estate, not claim millions of dollars? The estate was not in great financial shape immediately following Elvis's death. It was cash poor, and a multi-million-dollar infusion would have been essential. To walk away from that kind of money seems illogical, unless there was a very good reason. The reason, theorists argue, is that Vernon knew his son was alive, and that filing a fraudulent claim would be a serious crime. However, trying to verify this claim is nearly impossible. Lloyd's of London is famously secretive and will not discuss its clients or policies, citing privacy. Elvis Presley Enterprises has never publicly addressed the rumor, so we are left with a piece of information that is potentially explosive but is also completely unsubstantiated by any public record. The skeptics argue the policy may never have existed, or, if it did, it may have had clauses that made it invalid. Perhaps related to the cause of death, many policies have exclusions for death related to illegal drug use, though Elvis's were prescription. Or, the story could be a complete fabrication. A rumor started to give the conspiracy a veneer of financial and legal credibility. Without documentation, it's one person's word against another's. The Lloyd's of London story is a perfect example of a phantom fact. It is stated so often and with such conviction that it is accepted as true by many, even though there is no public evidence to support it. But if it is true, it is one of the hardest pieces of evidence for the official story to explain away. Is it possible to find out through legal or financial records if such a policy ever existed? If the policy was real, who were the named beneficiaries? Could Colonel Tom Parker have had a financial motive related to insurance that we still don't know about? Number 7. What did Vernon Presley know? Vernon Presley was a quiet, unassuming man who was thrust into the center of a whirlwind when his son became the most famous person on earth. He was by Elvis's side his whole life, managing his finances in his home at Graceland. When Elvis died, Vernon was the patriarch, the man in charge, and his behavior in the days and weeks following his son's death was, to some, deeply strange. His actions and his words have been analyzed endlessly for clues that he knew more than he was letting on. The most significant action was his decision to have the official autopsy report sealed for 50 years. This is the single most powerful fuel for the conspiracy theories. Why do it? The family had a right to privacy, of course. The details of Elvis's health were embarrassing. But to seal it for half a century is an extreme measure. It guaranteed that the full medical truth would not be known until almost everyone involved was dead. Did he do it to protect the family's image? Or was he hiding something bigger? Was he hiding the fact that the cause of death was not what was being publicly stated? Or, as the theorists claim, was he hiding the fact that there was no death at all? Then there were his public statements. In an interview shortly after the funeral, Vernon said things that have been interpreted as cryptic. He spoke about Elvis's fans, saying something to the effect of, they won't have to miss him, he'll just be away for a while. To a grieving father, this could be a spiritual comment, a way of saying his son's spirit lives on. To a conspiracy theorist, it's a literal statement. He also made comments about the will and the estate that seemed to suggest he wasn't acting like the executor of a deceased person's fortune, but rather the caretaker of an absent person's assets. And there's the gravestone. Vernon was in charge of the burial and the marker. The decision to spell Elvis's middle name Aaron instead of the legally correct Aaron has always been a point of contention. The family's explanation is that Aaron was the original spelling on his birth certificate and was the spelling Elvis himself preferred. But believers see it as a deliberate signal from Vernon, a way of saying, the person buried here is not the real Elvis Aaron Presley. It's a clue for those who are smart enough to see it. Vernon himself died only 2 years later in 1979. His health declined rapidly after Elvis's death. Was it from grief, or was it from the stress of maintaining a worldwide deception? Whatever he knew, he is not here to tell us. Vernon is the tragic and mysterious figure at the center of the story. His motivations are the key. If you believe he was a grieving father trying to protect his son's memory, then his actions make a certain kind of sense. But if you believe he was an accomplice in his son's escape, his actions also make a certain kind of sense. He is the blank slate onto which both sides of the mystery project their theories. Why 50 years for the autopsy seal? Why not 20 or 75? Was there a legal or personal significance to that number? Did Vernon leave behind any private letters or journals that might explain his decisions? Could his seemingly strange behavior simply be the result of a man in deep shock and grief, not a conspirator? Number 6. Who was telling the truth in the Memphis Mafia? Elvis Presley did not live alone. He was surrounded 24/7 by a group of friends, relatives, and employees known as the Memphis Mafia. These were the men who worked for him, traveled with him, and protected him from the outside world. They were his confidants and his companions. They were also the primary witnesses to his final years, months, and days. If anyone knew the truth about Elvis's state of mind, his health, and what really happened on August 16, 1977, it was them. The problem is their stories don't always match, and their loyalty was, at times, questionable. A major crack in the wall of silence came in 1977, just weeks before Elvis died, with the publication of the book Elvis: What Happened. It was written by 3 former bodyguards, Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler. Elvis had fired them the year before, and the book was a tell-all expose of his violent temper, his bizarre behavior, and, most importantly, his massive prescription drug abuse. The book was a bombshell. For the first time, the public was getting a look behind the curtain, and the picture was not pretty. Elvis was reportedly devastated by what he saw as a betrayal by men he considered brothers. After his death, the book was seen in a new light. Was it a revenge-fueled smear campaign? Or was it a desperate last-ditch effort by the bodyguards to sound an alarm and force Elvis to get help? The authors claimed it was the latter, but other members of the Memphis Mafia, like Joe Esposito and Charlie Hodge, remained fiercely loyal and publicly condemned the book. This created 2 camps within the inner circle, those who were willing to talk about the dark side, and those who were committed to protecting the official image. Over the decades, as more members wrote books and gave interviews, the picture became even murkier. Details about the final day changed, depending on who was telling the story. Timelines shifted. Conversations were remembered differently. Was this just the natural fallibility of memory over time? Or were some people lying? Were they protecting themselves, protecting Elvis's legacy, or hiding a much bigger secret? The fake death theories thrive on these inconsistencies. If the key witnesses can't agree on the basic facts of the day he died, how can we trust anything they say? Atheists would argue that the conflicting stories are intentional, designed to create confusion and obscure the truth of his escape. The Memphis Mafia are our primary sources, but they are not unbiased observers. They were employees, their livelihoods depended on Elvis, their relationships were complex, filled with love, resentment, and loyalty. Each man's story is colored by his own personal experience and his own motivations, making it impossible to construct a single, definitive narrative from their collective testimony. Did the members of the Memphis Mafia ever meet as a group after Elvis's death to align their stories? How much did Colonel Tom Parker influence what the loyal members said to the press? Is it possible that some members knew about an escape plan while others were deliberately kept in the dark? Number 5, why is the timeline of his final hours so messy? For an event that has been scrutinized for over 4 decades, the exact timeline of Elvis Presley's final hours is surprisingly fuzzy. The official story is fairly simple, but the details provided by the key witnesses have sometimes been inconsistent, leading to questions about what really happened in the upstairs suite at Graceland between the night of August 15th and the afternoon of August 16th, 1977. The last person to see Elvis alive was his girlfriend at the time, Ginger Alden. She was the one who discovered his body. Her account is the foundation of the official narrative. According to Alden's book, Elvis and Ginger, she and Elvis returned to Graceland late in the evening after a dental appointment. They relaxed, Elvis played the piano and sang a few songs. He had trouble sleeping. Around 9:30 a.m. on the morning of the 16th, he told her he was going into his bathroom to read. She went back to sleep. She woke up in the early afternoon around 1:30 p.m. and realized Elvis wasn't in bed. She knocked on the bathroom door and got no response. She opened the door and found him collapsed on the floor. She called for help. Joe Esposito and Al Strada, another aide, rushed upstairs. An ambulance was called at 2:33 p.m. He was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital at 3:30 p.m. That's the basic story. But there are discrepancies. The exact time of discovery has been questioned. Some early reports suggested he was found earlier. There have been questions about how long he had been on the floor before being found. The state of the body, particularly the degree of rigor mortis and livor mortis, has been debated by medical experts looking at the reports, with some suggesting he may have died much earlier in the morning than the official timeline suggests. And then there are questions about the scene itself. Who was there? What did they do? The first people on the scene were not paramedics or police, they were Elvis's own staff. In the panic and chaos, was the scene disturbed? Was evidence moved or cleaned up? The book Elvis What Happened had already detailed Elvis's history of overdoses and near-death experiences. Some have speculated that the scene was cleaned of drug paraphernalia before the authorities arrived to protect his image. If that happened, it would mean the first responders did not get a true picture of the situation. This, again, opens the door for speculation. If they were willing to alter the scene to hide the truth about a drug overdose, what else might they have been willing to do? A messy timeline and a potentially compromised scene make it impossible to know for sure what took place in that bathroom. The confusion surrounding the last few hours of Elvis's life is a critical part of the enduring mystery. In any official investigation, a clear and verified timeline is the backbone of the case. With Elvis, that backbone is fractured. The inconsistencies may be innocent, the result of trauma and confusion. Or they may be a sign that the story we have been told is not the whole story. Why was there such a long delay between when Ginger Alden says she woke up and when the ambulance was finally called? Were there other people who entered the room before the ambulance arrived whose presence was never officially documented? Could a more precise time of death have been established at the time? And if so, why was that information not made clearer to the public? Number 4, was the gravestone misspelling a deliberate clue? It's a small detail, but it has launched 1,000 theories. On the gravestone in the meditation garden at Graceland, the name reads Elvis Aaron Presley. But Elvis's legal middle name was Aaron with 2 A's. He legally changed it later in life to match the biblical spelling, and his father Vernon, who was in charge of the burial arrangements, certainly knew this. So why would he allow what appears to be a glaring typo to be carved into the final monument for his beloved son? The official explanation from the Presley family and Elvis Presley Enterprises is straightforward. They say that Aaron was the original spelling on his birth certificate, and it was the spelling Elvis and his family had always used. They chose to use that original spelling on the gravestone as a personal tribute, a nod to his origins. To them, it's not a mistake. It's a sentimental choice. This is a perfectly plausible explanation. However, for those who believe Elvis faked his death, this explanation is a smokescreen. To them, the misspelling is a deliberate coded message. It's a clue left by Vernon for the true fans, a way of saying, the man you know as Elvis Aaron Presley is not actually buried here. The logic is that you would never make such a careless mistake on the grave of a loved one, especially one as famous as Elvis. Therefore, the mistake must be intentional. It's a signal that the entire burial is a fraud. Some have even gone so far as to say that by spelling the name incorrectly, the grave is legally and spiritually not his, leaving Elvis free to live under his real name. This theory gains power because it's a physical, permanent piece of evidence that anyone can go and see. It's not a blurry photo or a third-hand story. It's carved in stone at one of the most famous homes in America. It's an anomaly that requires an explanation. And if you are already inclined to distrust the official story, the explanation that it's a deliberate clue is far more compelling than the explanation that it's just a family preference. It fits perfectly into the narrative of a grand, intricate deception where even the smallest details were planned. It turns a simple gravestone into a piece of a puzzle. The Aaron versus Aaron debate is a perfect example of how the two sides of the Elvis mystery can look at the exact same fact and come to completely opposite conclusions. One side sees a sentimental family choice. The other sees a clue to a massive conspiracy. The truth depends entirely on your starting point, and without being able to ask Vernon Presley why he chose that spelling, the debate will never be settled. Why was the spelling Aaron used on some official documents during his life if the family's preferred spelling was Aaron? Are there any other known instances of a family deliberately choosing a wrong or original spelling for a gravestone? Could the choice have been a simple mistake by the engraver that Vernon, in his grief, either didn't notice or didn't have the energy to correct? Number 3, was the coffin photo really him? In the age before the internet, supermarket tabloids were king, and on September 6, 1977, the National Enquirer published a cover that shocked the world. It was a grainy black and white photograph of a man lying in a coffin. The headline screamed, "Elvis, the last photo." The man in the picture was bloated, his face puffy and almost unrecognizable, but the shape of the nose, the lips, the jet black hair seemed to be him. The photo was allegedly taken by one of Elvis's own cousins, who was paid a large sum of money for it. The issue sold millions of copies and became the most famous edition in the tabloid's history. The photo caused immense pain to Elvis's family and fans, but it also started a debate that continues to this day. Was that really Elvis in the coffin? From the very beginning, many people said no. They insisted the man in the photo did not look like Elvis. They pointed to the shape of the eyebrows, the slope of the nose, the texture of the skin. They argued that even with the weight gain and the effects of death, the man in the photo was just. It was a carefully crafted wax figure designed to look enough like Elvis to fool the public during the open casket viewing. Skeptics and forensic experts have their own explanations. The process of death and embalming can drastically change a person's appearance. The puffiness could be the result of the underlying health issues that led to his death, as well as the embalming process itself. The angle of the photo could be distorting his features, and the photo itself is of poor quality, making a definitive judgment difficult. But the believers remain unconvinced. They see the photo not as proof of his death, an image of his body in a coffin, but as proof of the conspiracy, an image of a fake body in that same coffin. The photo is a Rorschach test. What you see in it depends on what you already believe. If you believe he died, you see a tragic, unflattering final image of the king. If you believe he is alive, you see a poorly made wax dummy, a key piece of evidence in a grand deception. The fact that the photo exists and is so widely known means that this specific questioning is that him. Its poor quality is both a weakness and a strength for the conspiracy theories. Because it is not a crystal clear image, it leaves room for interpretation, for doubt, and for endless debate. It is a permanent visual question mark. Have modern photo analysis experts ever done a definitive forensic comparison of the coffin photo with authenticated photos of Elvis? Why did the family not sue the National Enquirer over the photo, an action that might have brought more facts to light? Could the body in the coffin have been an impersonator or a stand-in and not a wax dummy? Number 2, what is in the sealed autopsy? This is the question. If there is a single smoking gun in the Elvis Presley mystery, it is the official autopsy report, which has been sealed from public view since 1977 and is not scheduled to be unsealed until 2027, 50 years after his death. This one document holds the key to the medical truth of how he died. The fact that it is hidden is the single greatest reason the mystery will never be solved, at least not until that date, and perhaps not even then. The official cause of death, announced just hours after he was pronounced dead, was cardiac arrhythmia, a generic term for an irregular heartbeat. The medical examiner stated that his death was from natural causes, and that drugs were not a major factor. This was immediately met with skepticism. Everyone knew about Elvis's prescription drug use, thanks in large part to the Elvis What Happened book. How could the vast quantities of drugs in his system not be a factor? A few months later, the story began to change. The Tennessee Board of Health launched an investigation into Dr. Nick. During these proceedings, it was revealed that the toxicology report, which is part of the autopsy, found 14 different drugs in Elvis's system, 10 of them in significant quantities. The list included powerful opiates like Dilaudid, Percodan, and Demerol, as well as sedatives like Quaaludes and Valium. The chief investigator for the state medical board, Charles Thompson, would later co-author the book The Death of Elvis, in which he argued that the cause of death was not a heart attack, but a massive overdose from polypharmacy, a toxic interaction of multiple prescription drugs. So we have two conflicting medical opinions. The original public statement, which blames his heart, and the later, more detailed analysis, which blames the drugs. The sealed autopsy report could settle this debate once and for all. What else is in there? Rumors have swirled for decades. Some say it contains evidence of chronic diseases like bone cancer or an autoimmune disorder that Elvis was hiding from the public. Others believe it contains even more damning evidence about the level of drug abuse, details so shocking that Vernon Presley sealed it to protect his son from a legacy of being remembered as nothing more than a Yankee. And of course, the conspiracy theorists have their own explanation. They believe the autopsy is sealed because it doesn't exist, or because it would show evidence of a non-fatal condition, proving that the death was faked. The act of sealing the report is, to them, an admission that there is something to hide. Whatever the reason, Vernon Presley's decision created a 50-year-long vacuum of information, and that vacuum has been filled with 4 decades of speculation, rumor, and myth. The sealed autopsy is the ultimate cliffhanger. It promises an answer, a final chapter to the story. But will it deliver? Even if the report is released in 2027, will it be the complete unaltered original? And after 50 years of hardened beliefs, would a piece of paper, no matter how official, be enough to convince everyone of the truth? What are the specific legal mechanisms in Tennessee that would allow a private citizen's autopsy to be made public after 50 years? Who will be the official body to release it? And will they also release the original tissue samples for modern retesting? Is it possible the report will be anticlimactic, revealing nothing more than what is already widely known about his poor health and drug use? Number 1 was the official cause of death a lie. This is the foundation of the entire mystery. If you can't trust the very first year and fact you were given, then you can't trust anything that follows. The official cause of Elvis Presley's death, announced on the evening of August 16, 1977, by medical examiner Dr. Jerry Francisco, was cardiac arrhythmia due to hypertensive heart disease. He explicitly stated that drugs played no role in his death. We now know with absolute certainty that this statement was not the whole truth. It was, at best, a misleading oversimplification, and at worst, a deliberate lie designed to protect the reputation of a beloved icon. The decision to frame the cause of death this way was made by the team of pathologists at Baptist Memorial Hospital, allegedly in consultation with the Presley family. They made a distinction between the cause of death and contributing factors. In their view, the underlying cause was a weak heart. The massive cocktail of prescription drugs was merely a contributing factor. But this is a distinction that many other medical professionals, including the investigators for the state medical board, found to be absurd. A person with a weak heart who takes a massive dose of depressant drugs doesn't just die of a weak heart. They die because the drugs stop their breathing and their heart. This initial deception, this noble lie, had a catastrophic effect on the public's trust in the official story. Once it was revealed through leaks and investigations that his body was full of powerful narcotics, the entire narrative collapsed. If they would lie about the drugs, what else were they lying about? This is the question that opened the door for every conspiracy theory that followed. The lie created a credibility gap, and into that gap rushed every wild theory imaginable, from a faked death to a mob hit. The reasons for the initial cover-up are understandable, if not excusable. Vernon Presley did not want his son to be remembered as an addict. The city of Memphis, and indeed the entire country, was in a state of shock and grief. No one wanted to tarnish the memory of the king, so a simpler, cleaner story was told. His heart just gave out. But the truth has a way of coming out. The subsequent revelations from the toxicology report and the trial of Dr. Nick painted a much darker and more complicated picture. The death was not clean, it was messy, it was a tragedy of addiction, excess, and enablement. Because the truth was not told from the beginning, a space was created where the mystery could grow and fester. And it has been growing ever since. The decision to obscure the role of drugs in Elvis's death is the original sin of this mystery. It was a well-intentioned but disastrous choice that permanently undermined the credibility of the official account. It taught the public to be suspicious, to question the facts, and to look for hidden meanings because they had been demonstrably misled from day one. Who made the final decision to downplay the role of drugs in the initial press conference? Was it the doctors Vernon Presley or Colonel Tom Parker? If the true cause of death polypharmacy crisis had been announced on day one, would the Elvis is alive phenomenon have ever gotten off the ground? Is the biggest mystery of all not whether he is alive, but why the people around him allowed him to slowly kill himself and then tried to hide that fact from the world.